Okay. I like that. I've never heard that before. That's a good little announcement. All right, I will go ahead and start because we do have quite a bit to cover. I went ahead and put a link to everyone. I don't know if you got it, so I will resend it in the chat. That is a nice little visual representation because we are rolling out a new application along with new standards, outcomes, and assessments. I am not Shawn O'Neill. I am Samantha Johnston. I'm the Assistant Director at the Center for Learning and Student Success at Syracuse University. I am also the ITTPC Assistant Coordinator. Shawn is the coordinator. He will be joining us halfway through, just a double booking thing today. But don't worry, I am well versed on what we are going to cover. If you have any questions, we're a smaller group, feel free to throw them in the chat. If you see me looking off on my double screen, it's because I'm looking at the chat function. If you have any questions don't be afraid to go ahead and put them in there and we will be more than happy to answer. We'll also use a KWL chart throughout the session that we'll get to in a minute. So today's agenda is we're going to just kind of do a review of the structure and the fees of joining and getting your certification, a breakdown of the 4 different criteria areas, a review of the application process, some tips and tricks, especially if you plan on going through the certification process. These little tips and tricks can save you a lot of time. And of course, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them up in the chat function. Originally I was gonna do a poll, but I'll skip over that. From a 1 to 5, go ahead in the chat. 1 being a relatively new person to this field and 5 being highly experienced. Rate your experience with CRLA. So maybe you're just learning about them, so it's a 1. If you know quite a bit about them and maybe you're a reviewer, that might be a 5. Perfect, perfect. Oh, awesome. Oh, wow, we got it's the whole array. This is fantastic. Excellent. Love to see it. Awesome. So why seek ITTPC certification? So ITTPC stands for International Tutor Training Program Certification. What we're doing is we certify training programs. We don't certify actual tutors. That's one of the things about our program. So it's very unique in that way. It's cost effective. It definitely increases program credibility. I can say that for me at Syracuse, it has definitely added quite a bit to everyone else on campus actually buying into what we're doing at our learning center. Sometimes that can be hard with faculty and other campus partners. It helps with documenting program initiatives. It's great for, especially I see a lot of 1s and 2s in there. If you're brand new, it really provides a good structure. I'll let Tanya in. It really provides a good structure when you're learning the new areas of certification or just the learning centers. Pathway for tutor development, the students love it. It adds to their resume, so they get a lot out of it. There's also Outstanding Tutor of the Year Award, which we'll talk about later. That's really beneficial to students. It also provides an opportunity to share best practices. We are endorsed by CLADEA. We've got 30 years of best practices, and you don't have to be a member to apply for certification. So basic overview. There are 3 levels of certification, and I'll go in depth in that in a minute. But you don't have to certify at all 3 levels. This is really important. Some schools are like community college where tutors might only stay for 1 or 2 years, and then you have to rehire for that position. That might not be ideal if for level 3, which is when you're really far deep. You've got you've been through level 1, level 2, level 3 trainings. So you don't have to certify at all 3 levels, and it's not always appropriate. Each level moves through different stages, and we'll talk about those stages in a minute. You renew your certification on a regular basis based on those certification stages. Let's take a look. Before we do, everyone cares about the fees. Right now, I'll let this person in. Application fees, you can do it 1 level at a time. However, it's a little bit more costly if you do that. If you plan on certifying for all 3 levels, suggest doing it all at once. You can save some money. There's also multiple campuses and multiple programs. What that means is, for example, if Syracuse had a satellite campus and they had a learning center, we could file under additional campuses. Or let's say at Syracuse, we have the writing center and we have class. If we wanted to, we could both get certification, but it would be multiple programs at the same campus. Again, you get a little bit of a money break if you wanted to add on that as well. Those can get pretty particular. So if you have questions on that, don't hesitate on reaching out for us. Each college is very unique in that, so don't be afraid to ask. We do have changes. If you didn't hear Amy and I chatting earlier, we are coming out with a new application and new standards, outcomes and assessments documents. We're kind of revamping. It's been a while. We spent a while going through and really looking at a number of things. And we've got input from professionals all around the country. And what we've developed is, previously, if you take a look, there used to be 3 stages. It used to be stage 1 is brand new, or if you let your certification lapse. Stage 2 used to be a reflection. So after a year of actually having your program certified, what's new, what did you change, what's working, what didn't work, and then recertification, which would be after like 3 or 4 years. Here are the changes that we made. Every 3 or 4 years, you would go through the process. We have eliminated that 3rd stage. So now there will only be stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 is for new programs, or if you're adding new levels. And stage 2 will be that continual renewal and reflection. So that's every 4 years. The levels are really for the tutoring program. So programs have a choice about the depth. So if you want to just do really basic, scratch the surface, level 1 is for you. Level 2, let's say you have quite a few tutors that you can retain for a number of semesters. Level 2 and level 3 are really great. Level 2 is advanced certified, so you add a little more self-reflective components, and then master certified is management and metacognition. So those are really when you're training your tutors to act a little bit more like supervisors or mentor tutors. That's what we see a lot. Again, you don't have to go for level 3 certification. However, if you do, you have to be certified with level 1 and level 2 because you have to work your way through the program. What I'm going to do, if I can do this, is break you out into breakout rooms. And if you can, go ahead and copy and paste that link, because as soon as I put you in breakout rooms, I don't think you'll be able to get the link. So highlight that link. It's a KWL chart, and I'll put you in a room for about 3 minutes and just kind of discuss what you know about ITTPC and questions you might have, and then we'll come back. So we won't spend too long on it. It's just for us to, yes, I can put it in the chat. Just kidding. 1 second. I also don't know if I put it in the chat if it's going to disappear, but yes. So I will stop sharing and put everyone into breakout rooms. Don't worry, it's not a test. I don't have the option to use breakout rooms, so that's okay. So here's what we're going to do. As we go through the presentation, go ahead, and if you have any questions, put them on that chart. We'll just pivot a little here. Does anyone have questions at this point? Go ahead and throw it in the chat if you have any questions. Nope. If you do, feel free to use that KWL chart. We'll come back to it. Now, there are 4 criteria that we look at: selection, training, experience, and evaluation. So I'll start with selection. So how do you choose your tutors? That's what we want to know. It should include an interview. It could be a group interview where you interview about 5 people at a time. Could be a one-on-one interview. Could be one tutor and you have like a panel. So maybe it's an administrator and a mentor tutor or something. Recommendation from a knowledgeable other. So you want some person to say, yes, they're knowledgeable about their content. An A or B grade in the subject that they're going to tutor, or justified equivalent experience. Justified equivalent experience can mean a number of things. For example, if you're hiring for a Spanish tutor, you might have them you might have a conversation with them in Spanish to test their knowledge about their abilities in Spanish. If you're hiring for Calc 1, you might give them a short 20-question quiz, and you have a cutoff point to make sure that they understand the knowledge that's going to be covered in that course. Those are some examples of equivalent experience. Could also be that they have a bachelor's in the area that they're going to tutor. So I can hire an econ tutor who's going to grad school, but they've already got their bachelor's, so they could tutor Econ 101. Training experience evaluation is a little bit more in depth. So let's take a look at those individually. So when it comes to training, tutors should attend each of the topics. So they really should be going to a core number of topics. Do the changes you discussed? Yes, great question. Sorry, I was reading a question that came in to me. Thank you to who said that. Peer educator certification is going to be pretty much a mirror image of this. They're going to have the same changes going on. Theirs are supposed to be slated to happen first, and then right after theirs are our ITTPC. So yes, peer education certification as well. However, there is a great addition to that, if you have both a peer educator, so an ITTPC certification, and an ITTPC, so peer educator and tutoring, for example, Syracuse does, there are certain topics that you can run training on together now. So if you run those trainings, you can run them at the same time, and it's really going to save you quite a bit of time. I'm very excited about it because I do most of our training. So great questions. Again, feel free to go ahead and throw your questions in the chat. It's not distracting. You know, highly encourage it. Each topic has to be covered for at least 30 minutes for it to count. 10 training tasks for at least 10 hours per level. So tutor training has to be 10 hours per level. And you'll see why in a second. Be given opportunities to be assessed. We want them to be assessed on the training, as they're tutoring, and really throughout the whole process. You must complete the requirements from one level before moving on to the next. For example, I have to train a tutor on level 1, all level 1 topics before they start level 2 topics. So they have to be a certified level 1 tutor before I start training them on level 2 topics. Each level, so again, there are 3 levels. Now there are 2 stages, 3 levels, 2 stages, 3 levels. Each level will choose 10 topics from 5 categories. And we'll tell you, for example, level 1 is really just the basic foundational. So you'll notice that the basics of tutoring, there's a lot more subjects that are required, which, speaking of, I will resend that link that goes more in depth on, let me just change this to everyone. This has a really good visual of what used to be and what is upcoming. So that'll show you the breakdown, but you'll see that there are more basics in level 1. We have communication, learning and studying, ethics, and electives. So there are certain ones, it depends on each level, how many tutor training topics from each one of those. Each topic has a set standard. So that's your general knowledge piece. An outcome, those are specific skills and behaviors, and recommended assessments. We have been working on new standards, outcomes, and assessment document. This is like 80+ pages. It is beautiful and very comprehensive. So if you're thinking about applying for certification, that is one document you will definitely want to use as a guide. What about synchronous? At each level, you have to have 10 hours of training, and 5 of those hours must be what we call TIS, which is tutor trainer led, interactive, and synchronous. I don't know about you, but right now, Syracuse, we're running most of our things online in terms of our support because we do group tutoring. So it would be hard to have group tutoring and following protocols. So all of our sessions are online. So we have been doing all of our trainings online as well. And that counts as TIS as long as I'm leading in. It's interactive. We're doing polls, we're doing breakout rooms, and it's happening right now. The goal is to provide just in-time feedback. You build rapport better. It provides opportunities for them to practice and make mistakes, so that way, sorry, admitting someone new. So that way, if something does happen, we can chat about it, fix it, and move forward. Experience. Tutors should either begin tutoring concurrently with training or immediately after. It just kind of depends on what you're thinking of. And if we have time, we'll get into a little schematic. Everyone has their own outline of tutor training. It's whatever works best for you, but it really should be, you shouldn't have all of your training up front. It should be throughout, so that way they're gaining that experience. Actually tutor during the sessions that count towards, so you can't just observe others. It's documentation is really important. You have to document how the tutors are gaining this experience and how much time they're doing it. If it's an hour session, that's important because we need to see that hour. If they're spending 5 or 15 minutes filling out surveys as part of that hour, that's not really tutoring. So that 15 minutes shouldn't count towards their experience. At Syracuse, we do group tutoring. So a session that has one person for an hour counts as the same as a 70-person session that we had last night for an hour. That is still 1 hour of tutoring. If it's one person or 70 people, it doesn't matter. It's just 1 hour of experience. They need 25 hours of experience at each level. It resets the clock once you have been certified at the level. So for instance, if I'm doing level 1 training in the fall, I need to get my tutors to 25 hours of experience so that way I can certify them. If they do 50, that's great. But if they haven't finished the tutor training, then they just have 50 hours. It doesn't, those hours don't continue on. Once they're level 1 certified, then the clock resets back to 0. Questions? Feel free to type in the chat. Anyone have any questions whatsoever? Doesn't look like it. I'll continue on. If I see anything pop up, I'll pause. Applying for certification. So first you start with the certification and you fill it out, the application. The application, again, we are doing a new application. It should be up in about a month or 2. You submit everything and then you pay the fee and then it comes to us. By us, I mean the reviewers, the application team. We have, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, we have reviewers from all over the country who look, we're trained and we look at your applications and we see if it meets standards or not. If it doesn't, then we reach out to you and we say, hey, you know, I have a couple of questions. We help you. We help you work through it and answer our questions, and then certifications are issued. Who are the reviewers? Well, it's Amy and I. We're 2 of them. Current or retired tutor training program administrators. We're in 16 of the US states and 1 Canadian province. 25 different institutions, so we kind of run the gamut of universities, 4-year colleges, community colleges. Half the team has been reviewing for over a decade. I am not that old. Hopefully you don't think so. But I know I've been reviewing for about 3 years now, and I've been coordinator for almost a year, assistant coordinator. I cannot tell you just how beneficial being a reviewer is. It definitely gets me more credibility on campus, gets me more credibility when I'm talking to people at other universities. Reviewers aren't paid. it's a voluntary thing. If you do a certain number of reviews, you can get free your registration to CRLA conference covered, which is great. I met Amy, so that was great. And I met Shawn. You really get to know quite a bit of people. If you have some extra time or you want to really add to your professional development, I highly encourage it. Documentation. It's important that when you do your application that you give us some documentation so that way we can kind of see what's going on. We want to see how you hire and select your tutors. So for example, you would send us your interview questions from an interview you conducted, and then you wrote the responses down, for example. Tracking of training hours and tutoring hours. That's very important. As a reviewer, I see a lot of need for improvement there. When you're tracking trainings, does every tutor have to complete the 25 hours before you apply? Oh no, you can still apply now. Oh yeah, you apply now. When you apply, what we ask is that you already have gone through the process. Not everyone, ooh, that's a great question. Not every tutor has to be certified. I've got tutors that don't complete training. Maybe one or two, they just don't complete the training, so they don't become certified. A couple of them, because we do, oh, here's Shawn. Because we do group tutoring at Syracuse, some of our tutors don't gain the 25 hours, so they can't become certified. So it's okay, you don't have to certify every one of your tutors. Does that answer your question? Let me know if it doesn't. You should definitely still apply. Hi, Shawn.
Hi.
I was just, you can go ahead and jump in. I just got through answering a question, and I just went through selection and hiring and then talking about the importance of tracking that. So you can pick up at sample eval.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the things that we ask about, we ask you to upload is the sample evaluation. Hi, everyone. I should introduce myself. Shawn O'Neill, coordinator for ITTPC. Samantha ever so graciously volunteered to jump in and help me out today. So it's nice to meet you all. So for the sample evaluation, what we ask you to do is to give us an actual authentic example of how you evaluate your tutors. You are welcome to black out or white out anybody's name or ID number. We just want to have a way of telling, like, how are you assessing them and how are you giving them feedback on their progress. So that's the big thing with the evaluation. You know, it's got to be authentic. If it's blank or if it's just a blank sheet of paper with strengths written on it, we don't know exactly what you're using that for. So we want to see what exactly you're using and how you're using it. For each level of documentation, we're going to ask you for either a syllabus if you have a course-based training program, or meeting agendas or some kind of chart or follow through, letting folks know a bird's eye view and a tutor's eye view. How do you work through the level, in what order, and that sort of thing. We also require you to, oh, do we have examples? Yes, sort of. In the new Standards, Outcomes, and Assessments publication that is coming out in a couple weeks, we have all sorts of examples and samples and specific ways that you might measure training outcomes for your specific institution. So we don't have anything that we require that you use, but we have some samples in that document. And that was a really great question. Have they been all really great questions today, Samantha? Awesome. Okay, so with the level documentation, with the samples, what we're looking for is basically give us everything you got for your absolute best training topics. So for level 1, we ask you for 2 topics, and for levels 2 and 3, we only ask you for 1. And so we're going to be looking for the PowerPoint, the lesson or session plan, any in-training assessments that you do, discussion prompts, activities. If you have them do a reading, you don't have to give us the reading, but we want to have the citation for it so that we know what you're doing. And this helps our review team to understand exactly how you put together your lessons. It's your way of demonstrating that you are a competent session planner and that you have effectively used copyright, that you have, I don't know, that you're doing training and that you're not just lecturing at your folks. We also ask for an annotated bibliography. So if you have been a certified program or currently certified, this is something that we started asking for back in 2015. With the changes that we're making that are coming out in a couple of weeks, the bibliography currently is give us a bibliography for all of the materials you use to develop or implement your training. With the new requirements that are coming out, we're going to only ask for a sample. So similar to how we're asking for sample materials from 2 sessions or 1 session, depending on level, we're going to do that with the annotated bibliography as well. So it's a little bit less of an undue hardship. And that's your opportunity to show, that practical and theoretical application of the research and experience of others. So any questions about the documentation? All right, do you want to go to the next slide, Samantha? Just let you control the slides. So we also ask you to comply with copyright. So we'll ask you to tell us about, what do you do to make sure that you're not accidentally or intentionally stealing another person's intellectual property? So there are lots of ways that you could be doing this. You could be meeting the 4 factors of fair use. You could be using materials that are Creative Commons or in the public domain. You could have a license, or your library could have a license for you to use or distribute particular content. If you're using things that are posted on YouTube, for example, YouTube has a specific licensing agreement that allows you to use that content in certain ways. So we just want to make sure that none of our certified programs are breaking federal law. I think the biggest issue that we've had with copyright is like you find something that you really like online and then you use it and you forget where you got it from. So by kind of requiring you to think this through, we're giving you the breadcrumbs to make sure that you are being intentional about your use of others' works and others' ideas. And then the bibliography, I already talked about that. Okay, so some big recommendations, and I'm not going to talk about all of these, and Samantha, maybe you might have other recommendations that you can jump in with as well. The biggest thing that we ask is that you have already implemented your program and done at least 1 cycle of training before you submit. So we certify training programs, not plans for training programs. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that what you submit is actually what you're going to be doing and what you have done. Now, those tutors that went through kind of your guinea pig year or semester, those tutors can still be recognized. We allow you to go back and recognize anybody that worked through the requirements during that time. But we want to make sure what you're submitting is actually what you're going to do. Because we know the best laid plans of mice and men, right? They don't always go the way you plan. We also really encourage you to have a colleague read through your application and check and make sure that it makes sense. So our reviewers can only know what you tell them. So we really want you to, if you have the ability to have someone out, even outside of your specific center, look at your materials, look at your narrative responses and go, oh, yeah, this makes sense. That will speed up the review process. I also really encourage you to have a timeline. It's easy for us to see if you give us that, again, the 10,000-foot view of what your training looks like. How do the pieces fit together? So, do you do a 3-day session at the beginning of the semester and then a midterm training session that you do? Okay, what do you offer in each of those sessions? If you do weekly sessions with your staff, how do you pace that out? What topics do you do in each session? That's also, again, not a requirement, but it helps the reviewer move more quickly. And they will often have fewer questions if you do that. We also encourage you to ask questions. Samantha, what kind of questions have you gotten recently?
I get a lot of questions on tracking. That tends to be what I get a lot is how should I track everything and show it so that way we can see what it looks like effectively. And I highly encourage Excel. I think that's an easy way to do it when you're tracking tutor training. Make sure that I can see like the topic, the date, um, if it's TIS or not, which we talked about earlier. And so I can see it by tutor as they go through the programs. That tends to be really big, especially if you have level 3. So I want to see how a tutor has gone through level 1, level 2, level 3.
Yeah, how do you know they've done everything? And that might be more than one piece of documentation. You may have a piece of paper where the tutor signs in and has the amount of time and the topic that you talked about that day. But then you aggregate that in some way. Do you put it into a spreadsheet? Do you log it in, WC Online or some kind of tracking software? How do you manage it? I don't know why WC Online was the first thing I thought of. We don't even use it at our center. Yeah, like Tutor Track or AccuTrack or any of those. Okay. The other thing that I'll say is about the submission. So it does take us time to move through applications. So plan to submit your application about 3 to 4 months prior to when you want to have your approval completed. So that gives us the opportunity to get to your application, review your application, and then go back to work with you if there are any issues or questions that we have. The more lead time you give us, the better it will be. So you don't end up like in a crunch situation where you're like, I said that we would be having certification by, December 10th, and here it is December 4th, and I haven't heard back yet. We never want to have you be put in that place. So always doing it a little early is recommended. Okay, oh yeah, write down my email address. Any questions about those recommendations or anything that's kind of on your mind right now? The other thing that I'll say is that we do have the contact information for our review team on our CRLA's website. So if later on you're like, oh gosh, I wish I could reach out to someone, we have it. It's there posted. You can reach out to us anytime. And we're really good about responding to emails. So these are some common mistakes that we see that slow up the review process. Again, like I said, if there is an issue with your application, we will come back and say, hey, we have a question here, or we're trying to figure out what you're doing with this. We don't just outright reject you without a conversation first. We want to work with you. As Roberta likes to say, the certifications director, we're not looking for perfect applications. We're looking for good programs. So these mistakes are more about making sure that you're not slowing us up unnecessarily. So big mistake, overly verbose narrative responses. Most of the questions on the application could be answered in 300 words or less, many of them with like 150 words. The longer and more verbose your narrative, the longer it takes for us to get through it. So be concise. A lot of times we have folks that don't explain copyright compliance. Sometimes we'll have folks that they will just not, they'll say, we don't use any copyrighted material. But then when we look at their application, we see, oh yeah, they have this book and this video and this other thing and this other thing. So just make sure that you're paying attention to copyright. The librarian at your institution is a great source for a definitive answer about copyright. So if you haven't checked with them recently, they're really, really good. In the new publication for the standards, outcomes, and assessments, we also have some really good resources for copyright compliance, if that's something that's not in your wheelhouse already. Another big thing is blank forms. I'm skipping down a little bit, but like I talked about before, we just want to make sure that we can actually see what you're doing rather than what you thought you might do. So giving us examples, real examples will help us out a lot. And then the last bullet here is really, really important. We require an evaluation, but we want that evaluation to reflect what you're trying to get to train your tutors to do. So it's not enough that you're assessing that they're good employees. We need to see that you're assessing that they're good trainees. So if you have taught them the preview, view, review model for structuring their session, for example, are you actually checking to make sure they're using that after training? So if we see that your evaluations don't measure that, we're going to come back and ask you about it and ask you for how do you assess the training, the trainee's competence over time. The other thing I like to say with this is that, students don't always know what good tutoring looks like. So getting feedback from your students about your tutors, a great idea, but that's not enough to evaluate whether your tutors are tutoring well. For example, I just had a student email me and she said, my tutor is always on time for her sessions. She seems to really understand the content really well. She cares about me. She follows up afterward. However, she doesn't give me handouts. I need a new tutor. Okay, that's feedback from a student. But I actually train my tutors to not give materials to their students and rather to help their students create their own materials. So again, you want to make sure that a more knowledgeable other is involved in that evaluation process, whether that's an administrator, a trainer, a program coordinator, somebody who is trained in your philosophy and your training ethos, who is aware of the content. In my office, we have some of our GAs help with evaluation, but they have to go through some training about what makes a good tutor, how to do the evaluation process, build up their knowledge base before we allow them to assess. Okay. What questions do you have? I'm working on my wait time. My students tell me I tend to jump in too soon. Okay. Well, Samantha, do you want to go back to the chart?
Which chart?
The KW chart.
We can. I didn't have access to breakout rooms,
Oh, that's fine.
so it's blank.
Okay.
I gave the link to everyone, and pretty much they've been asking questions as we go.
Okay. Elizabeth, brave, excellent.
Ooh.
What are the most important takeaways for a program that might consider going through this process? Ooh, I like that a lot. So I don't know, Samantha, do you have something you want to say? I'm always the one talking.
No, you can go ahead. I'll add on if I think of anything.
Okay. So Elizabeth, the thing that I like to focus on when I'm telling my colleagues about why this is important or why they should be doing this, number one, CRLA ITTP certification is one of the longest running tutor training certifications anywhere in the world. We've been around since 1989, and we've been certifying literally thousands of programs in that time. Our review team has over 100 years of experience combined just with helping programs get their feet off the ground and maintain standards over time. Another big thing that I think is important is that this is a way for you to force yourself to take the time to build and reflect on what you're doing in training and why you're doing it, and building some confirmation or confirmatory assessment that what you're training your tutors to do is meeting the needs of your students. And as a very busy person, it would be very easy for me to not do that type of reflection and growth work and just go, well, we've always done it this way, so let's always do it this way. But knowing that I have certification and knowing that I have that renewal process that occurs very regularly, it forces me to do the work. So for example, this year, my own program is coming up for renewal. And so we started last year redeveloping some of our training topics. And we went, oh, wow, I don't like the way this is actually being presented. It worked fine when we developed it, but we know better now. So giving that time. The other thing I think is really important is that a lot of the requirements for certification are what the research says makes training work and has an impact on student success. And our bibliography in our new standards, outcomes, and assessment is attributes to that. So those would be kind of the big things for me. I also have found that people take you seriously as a program when you say, oh yeah, well, we're a certified program. It's not just that we hire Joe Schmo off the street. We have a process in place that recognizes and develops them as tutors. Yes, Tamika, I have a link for that. Let me pull that up. So I have the new list of topics handy right here. I know they didn't make it into the slide deck because we were trying to keep it streamlined. So those are the new topics for each of the levels. And I also have, oh, you shared the handout already, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you look in there for every single level, it will cover all the different topics and how many you need to select from each category. One of the things that I really like about the way that we've structured this is it makes sure that you have a well-rounded program. So whereas before we just had a big list of topics to choose from, we're now giving you the ability to go, oh yeah, they don't just need to know how to be a tutor, how to do the administrivia that comes with being a tutor, but they also have to know how to talk to students about, how to study and how to manage their stress and how to deal with ethical concerns that come up. Some of the new topics we've added around race and class and privilege and gender identity and intercultural communication, and like we've added a lot of depth to what you have the option to choose from now, which is really awesome and has really inspired my colleagues in our program development as well.
Shawn, do you remember what the old number of topics to what the new topics are? Because there's quite an increase, right? In like options to choose from.
Yeah, so we went from 30 topics to 66.
And so if you're already a certified program, we're not saying that you have to revamp everything. like a lot of the old topics fit in with the new topics.
Mhm. Yeah, like one of the really good examples, and of course, I'm blanking on names of things when I'm talking to people, but we used to have a session, all of the basic sessions did not change at all. So tutor do's and don'ts, conducting a successful session, role of a tutor, and then like the policies and procedures stuff, those are all topics that were on the old list. That didn't change at all. With communication, we added tutoring conversations, but the other topics were on the list already. So we've kind of just reconfigured some things and then broke some other things out. So instead of just having one topic that was called study strategies, we've broken that out into 6 different topics, all around the concept of studying and learning. So now you can talk about, for example, graphic organizers, which is something we're doing in my center this year. We're really excited about it. So how do you help tutors learn how to display information graphically? That is both a study strategy and a tutoring skill. And that can be one of your trainings. So it's really awesome. Any other questions? Yeah, and I will say Samantha and I, we have reviewed every single program, well, since Samantha started, every single application that has come through, at least one or the other of us has looked at in addition to our review team. So if you are unsure about, does this meet the requirement, or what do you mean by, do feel free to reach out to us as you do your program development. We won't pre-review content, so don't send us your application and say, is this good enough? But if there are specific elements that you want to chat about, we're happy to do that work. Can we share the PowerPoints? Yes. We can share. Is this a slide deck?
It's Google Slides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can share. I think there are a couple of some additional slides that we probably want to take out from this particular deck, but we can share the ones that we have here. Absolutely.
I will say that sometimes, especially if you're just getting started and you've got some questions, definitely reach out, and like a 30-minute conversation with me could save you hours of work. And just like, little tips like, oh, contact your librarian to help with copyright, and make sure your annotated bibliography includes it. Just like little things like that can really help. So if you've got questions, don't be afraid to reach out.
I will also say not to get, well, I can't say don't, because people are going to do what they do. Don't freak out about certification. For example, I had somebody that spent literally a week of their life trying to figure out how they were going to track their tutoring experience. And she was like, I cannot figure out how to do this. What am I supposed to be doing? In 5 minutes, we figured out that she already had what she needed. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to reach out and use your resources. Use the Learn Assist listserv if you're not already on the Learn Assist. Join it. Set it on digest because it is a very active listserv. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of emails. That is a great place to get information and to bounce ideas off of colleagues. And the new SOAs document is coming out maybe the first week of April, mid-second week at the latest. It has a ton of resources. So now instead of it just being, I think, 20 pages, the new standards, outcomes, and assessment document is 110 pages with lots of bookmarks and lots of, like ways of navigating it. So you don't have to read it top to bottom, but we've definitely put a lot of thought into that. So that will be a great resource for you as well. Any other questions? Samantha, did you talk about the Summer Institute?
I did not.
Okay. While folks are putting in their questions in the chat, One of the things that I'll mention is this year, because of COVID and many of us are restricted in travel, we are not doing a full summer institute. We're going to be doing a series of webinars throughout the summer around certification and, you know, giving folks a place to look in and play with the new application. However, typically each semester or each summer, we do a summer institute, which is a 3-day intensive retreat where we get you into a fancy hotel. It's not actually like super expensive. We get a really great rate, but we stay there for 3 days and we do the work of developing a training program. So it's a way to work in a small group. We cap registration at 40 people. And during that institute, we do you know, how to set up a philosophy of tutoring. What is the training cycle supposed to look like? How do you develop lesson plans? What do you do if you're using someone else's materials? Like, how do you document your work? What are different ways of doing this thing or that thing? And so if once we all get back to normal, that's something that you feel like would be a good use of your time, take a look at the website. We are planning on a summer institute for next year. It'll be in St. Louis, Missouri, and it'll be a really great opportunity if you can spare it. Other than that, we also do stuff at the CRLA Summer Conference. We do events like this where we do conference sessions all over the place. So, you know, don't be afraid to reach out. Are there any other questions for us? Well, then what I am going to do, I'm just going to delete those extra slides, Samantha.
Mm-hmm.
And I can share this link with folks in the chat. Okay, so that should work for the slide deck, Tamika. All right, well, I hope everybody is super excited about certification. It's like Samantha and I, it's our hobby, but also like my life's work. When I think about, you know, what my legacy in our field is going to be, I think I've chosen a good thing to focus on, helping other people learn how to better help other people. So if you do have anything that comes up later, or as you're working through aligning your program with CRLA standards or revising your program, and you're not sure what you can and cannot do, don't be afraid to reach out. If there's anything we can do to help, we will. And if we can't, we will tell you we can't. So we're really good at boundary setting too. You're welcome.
Before everyone leave, I would like everyone to scan the QR code to submit their session evaluation.
Ooh, QR code, love it.
We use that for our peer educator program for all of our surveys and stuff. Students like it a lot better than like, especially if when they're in person and they just
They can
kind
just
of
put
take
phone
their
up.
phone. Yeah.
Yeah, we tried doing link shorteners, and they work when you're virtual, and people can actually click on it, but they don't work very well in person because people are like trying to type on their phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for allowing us to tell you about ITTPC. And thank you, Samantha, for doing most of the session.
No problem.